Hey everybody, I'm Peter Jennings.
And I'm addicted to eating endangered species.
We're going to be getting calls from PETA after this.
I'm the president of PETA.
And how do you get away with eating endangered species?
No, not that PETA. I'm part of PETA, People Eating Tasty Animals. We invented the koala dog.
That explains a lot.
Indeed. Welcome to our special on diplomacy and disaster.
Oh, how often they coincide.
We begin with the Panama Canal Treaties, also known as the Torrijos and Carter Treaties.
The Panama Canal Treaties were two different treaties signed in Washington, D.C. on September 7th, 1977.
The first treaty, called the Treaty Concerning the Permanent Neutrality and Operation of the Panama Canal, stated that the U.S. retained permanent right to defend the canal from any threat that might interfere with its continued service to ships of all nations.
The second treaty, simply called the Panama Canal Treaty, stated that the U.S. would transfer control of the Panama Canal to Panamanian authorities at midnight on January 1st, 2000. Panama would then assume full control of canal operations and become primarily responsible for its defense.
Next, we have the Taiwan Relations Act, passed in 1979.
This act enabled the U.S. to establish relations with the Chinese government in Taiwan, called the Republic of China.
This is different from those commies in the People's Republic of China.
Well said.
The act stated that the U.S. would, quote, consider any effort to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific area. However, the act did not say that the U.S. would have to intervene.
The People's Republic of China did not recognize the Taiwan Relations Act because it viewed it as an intrusion into Chinese and South Pacific affairs.
Yeah, they're just jealous.
Next in the news, the Camp David Peace Accords were signed in Washington, D.C. on September 17, 1978 by Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, witnessed by U.S. President Jimmy Carter.
The first agreement, called a Framework for Peace in the Middle East, established a framework for negotiations to establish a self-governing authority in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. It also dealt with Egyptian-Israeli relations in general, and rules that should apply to relations between Israel and all of its Arab neighbors.
The second agreement, called a Framework for the Conclusion of a Peace Treaty between Egypt and Israel, outlined a basis for a peace treaty deciding the future of the Sinai Peninsula. Israel agreed to withdraw its armed forces from the Sinai Peninsula, evacuate its 4,500 civilian inhabitants, and restore it to Egypt in return for normal diplomatic relations with Egypt.
It also guaranteed freedom of passage through the Suez Canal and other nearby waterways, such as the Straits of Tiran, and a restriction on the forces Egypt could place on the Sinai Peninsula, especially within 20 to 40 kilometers from Israel. Israel also agreed to limit its forces a smaller distance, around 3 kilometers, from the Egyptian border, and to guarantee free passage between Egypt and Jordan.
The agreement also resulted in the United States committing to several $1 billion worth of annual subsidies to the governments of both Israel and Egypt, subsidies which continue to this day.
Now we go to a special interview with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat by our own Ted Koppel.
Mr. President. I'm Ted Koppel, here with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Mr. Sadat, really, what is going on here at Camp David? What's it all about?
We wish to establish diplomacy with the State of Israel, and by signing these peace accords, and because of my country's influence in the region, we wish to persuade other Middle Eastern countries to represent, to tolerate the existence of Israel, and these Camp David Accords, helped negotiate by your president, Jimmy Carter. We feel it will accomplish much in the region.
Interesting. Now, what does this chessboard have to do with the Camp David Peace Accords?
Well, when one has many world leaders, important leaders, such as myself and the Israeli Prime Minister and your U.S. President, when we discuss the future of diplomacy in the region all day, we get a little bored, and we like to keep things, how you say, casual. Yes, and one of the ways we do this is we play chess, and we have the tournaments, and it's a lot of fun. Yes.
Who would you say is the best player of you three?
I would have to say that myself and the Israeli Prime Minister have the same level of skill, but your U.S. President, he does not have the same level of skill.
Alright, well, it's okay. Americans can't be good at everything.
This is true, yes.
Or we can. But anyway, So maybe what you're trying to do here at Camp David is put a checkmate on perceptions. That's you, Dan.
Now for some disaster.
Holy crap! Nuclear core meltdown in the U.S.
On March 28, 1979, the Unit 2 nuclear power plant on 3 Mile Island suffered a partial core meltdown. This was the worst accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power generating history, even though it led to no deaths or injuries to plant workers or members of the nearby community.
The accident unfolded over the course of 5 tense days, as a number of agencies at local, state, and federal levels tried to diagnose the problem and decide whether or not the ongoing accident required a full emergency evacuation of the entire population. The full details of the accident were not discovered until much later. In the end, the reactor was brought under control.
Although approximately 25,000 people lived within 5 miles of the island at the time of the accident, no identifiable injuries due to radiation occurred. And a government report concluded that, quote, the projected number of excess fatal cancers due to the accident is approximately 1, end quote. But the accident had serious economic and public relations consequences, and the cleanup process was slow and costly.
It also furthered a major decline in the public popularity of nuclear power, proving the public's worst fears about nuclear technology. And, until the Chernobyl disaster, 7 years later, it was considered the world's worst civilian nuclear accident.
And that's diplomacy and disaster. Time for dinner.
Okay, what's on the menu?
Polar bear.
That can't be kosher.